This might surprise you, but we take an awful lot of things for granted in life and just assume that they've always been that way when in fact, they haven't. For example, when my company, the Research and Planning Group, was started back in 1983 by my former boss and mentor, David Rich, approximately 0% of the work he did for the first 10 years was done on a computer. We didn't have a website because the internet was still the DARPANet, and the World Wide Web didn't exist until 1989. And even when RPG did finally build a website in the early 2000s, it didn't do very much, just because the primary use of the internet during that time was not that different from consulting a phone book. And speaking of the phone book, do you know how important it used to be to not only have a phone book, but to be listed in one of them? It wasn't that long ago that anywhere you went, including hotels, you would find a phone book. And that was the primary way you'd look people up and contact them because it listed their phone number and often their mailing address. If you changed your phone number, it would take a while for the phone books to catch up with you. And that would either mean blissfully not getting telephone calls from solicitors during dinner or being aggravated about not getting calls from anyone. And those calls you'd get wouldn't be on a cell phone like today. What we now call a landline was known for decades simply as a phone line, and most homes only had one. People would plan their days around being available to be called on the phone, especially if an important call might come in. Conveniences like call waiting, caller ID, and voicemail were optional services, as were wireless handsets and touch-tone dialing. In fact, my grandparents still had the old rotary phones in their house in the 1990s, and those phones still worked for making calls. But you'd better believe that we would only use those rotary phones for local calls in the 1990s because long-distance calls were expensive. And if you wanted to save some money on them, you could go to the store and purchase long-distance calling cards where you dial a toll-free 1-800 number and then put in an even longer number for your calling card and then the number you wanted to call, all just to save a few bucks on calling people long distance. Today, everyone recites their phone number with an area code first, but 20 years ago, they would assume you knew it unless they were on vacation and far away from home. I could go on, but I know I'm kind of sounding like old grandpa now, talking about the good old days. But the thing is, they weren't the good old days. They were just the different old days where we did things that required different assumptions. We've gotten used to the new normal because we're really adaptable people. But guess what? 10 or 20 years from now, there will be new ways of doing things, and we'll look back on this time as being different. And we'll assume then, as we do now, that everything we do makes perfect sense because we all know how it works. As a research professional, there are times where I need to get people to think outside of what they know and reveal their assumptions about things. And one of the tricks for doing that is a creative exercise called The Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm going to teach you how to use that technique today. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. The Stranger in a Strange Land exercise has many other names, including the Blind Alien exercise, the Stranger exercise, or the Foreigner exercise. It's often credited to a researcher named Alfred Schutz, who published a paper, The Stranger, an Essay in Social Psychology, in the American Journal of Psychology in 1944. But there's also a little bit of the novelist Robert Heinlein in the more modern forms of the exercise, complete with the idea that the stranger, much like the Martian-born Messiah Mike in the novel Stranger in a Strange Land, needs to grok what other people are saying through discussion. And here you thought Grok was just a problematic AI platform from Elon Musk. Nope, read your Heinlein. But no matter what you call it, the premise is always the same. The interviewer takes on the role of the stranger who knows nothing about anything, and the interviewee has to answer some very granular questions. But this goes way beyond a Socratic dialogue because the interviewer isn't trying to prove a point or uncover contradictions. Rather, the interviewer is trying to understand the assumptions underneath the language, actions, emotions, norms, and shared understanding that individuals in a society have. This can uncover some amazing insights, but I'm going to warn you that it's also really, really tedious, and it involves absolutely wearing people out. So use it with some discretion. So here's how it works. Let's say that I am Sean the stranger and I'm asking my friend Jason, that's actually just me and a bad mustache, to explain a simple concept to me like, what's a phone? So hold this up and let's ask about it. Jason's probably going to explain to me that a phone is a device you use to call people. And I, in my role as Sean the stranger, I'm going to ask him all about what that means. What does it mean to call someone? Are we just yelling into the phone? Are we calling them names? Are we trying to get them to do something? Oh, it means to talk, but the person who calls is the one who starts the talking. Okay, so how do you call someone? Well, Jason will say you dial their number, but how do you get their number? How do you make sure you're calling the right number? What happens if you call the wrong number? And these phrases, pick up and hang up, what do they really mean? Oh, you mean they're not metaphors, but they are really describing how phones used to work? Interesting. But what's this button here, the mute button? That's really weird. Why would you want to mute someone when you're talking to them? Jason might tell us we want to mute ourselves. Okay, why would you want to mute yourself? Why? Why would you call someone if you had things going on around you that you'd want to block out? What would the purpose of that be? And speaking of this whole calling thing, can these phones also do video calls? Jason says they can. Well, why don't people use video calls more often then? Why would you use a video call? When would you use a video call? Why wouldn't you use a video call? Why do some people feel like they're intrusive? What you mean that some people are afraid to even talk on the phone, even if video is not involved? Why is that? You get the idea. But you can just hear in this description of a dialogue how we're taking the complex onion of a topic like what is a phone and peeling it back and starting to hear already that our way of describing a phone is filled with metaphors and assumptions and vestiges of what phones used to be that got us to the form that we use today. And this dialogue didn't even touch on some of the other topics like how phone numbers work or what else a smartphone can do or why people are so attached to these devices. But if you conduct this exercise by simulating a naive state of mind, you can often begin to uncover ideas that people take for granted but don't really think about. So for example, let's say that discussion spent more time talking about the mute button and why you might want to use it. It might lead to a deeper discussion about why both parties in a phone call feel the need to be able to control what the other person hears. Is it out of consideration for others, or is it a more deceptive practice intended to mask what people are really doing? Do all people use it the same, or do some people use it differently? Does the context matter, such as the difference between talking to a family member and talking to a stranger? There is a lot to unpack there, and a guided discussion about that topic could yield some interesting and important behavioral insights that would never come up through a more conventional discussion. And that's where this exercise can be really valuable. It forces people to explain their assumptions through a spirit of understanding and helpfulness. And particularly when you're dealing with a stale old topic where you're hearing the same old things, a stranger in a strange land exercise can help you to break out of that mold. But there is a drawback I alluded to earlier, and you can perhaps pick it up on my dialogue. This technique is agonizing for both the research team and the interviewee because it involves so much back and forth and probing to get anything useful. It can aggravate people and make them feel defensive if you start poking them about things they can't explain well, and it can also cause them to do something we never want to see happen in research, and that's change their mind as a result of the questioning because they were beginning to realize their assumptions aren't quite as rock solid as they believed they were before the questioning began. So, we researchers tend to recommend confining this exercise to exploratory research and picking your subjects carefully. Maybe start with friends or family members and colleagues who don't mind being aggravated, and then zero in on some insights you can then introduce them to into more conventional lines of questionings with strangers. Or pay your interviewees really well and tell them up front what you're going to do. Just be aware that they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear so they can get paid in the end, and you have to accommodate that for that in your questioning. Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about this exercise, and if you ever do want to try it out, pick up that shiny black box you have and get in touch with me. I'd be happy to pester you with questions for a while, and who knows, you may learn something interesting in the process. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time. This month's plug is for the American Marketing Association St. Louis chapter, or AMA St. Louis. And, many of our guests that are on the Marketing Gateway have been part of this organization. Some of them are members, some of them are board members, some of them are people that just show up. All of those kinds of folks are welcome. I go in there as a researcher, not expecting to meet very many other marketing researchers. Sometimes I get to meet a few, but I meet a lot of other people that are doing other things: digital marketing, accounts-based marketing, creative agencies, billboards, marketing strategy, fractional CMOs, teaching in the classroom, all sorts of other things related to marketing. And some organizations send their entire department to some of our events. Some of them just send one person. You get to know people from all over the area who are doing all kinds of neat and interesting things. I want to mention, you can come to any of our fun events without having to be a member. I'm a member. I'm not on the board right now, but I am a member. So I just show up. But I wasn't a member for a while. And we have a coffee club. We do the first Thursday of every month. We have usually some kind of seminar at lunch or breakfast, or this month it's bowling, that we do somewhere in the month. And we also have all kinds of neat activities, including a conference, which is going to be in April. So if you're interested, go to amastlouis.org to sign up. I think you will find that it is well worth your time to connect to your local marketing community.